Welcome. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What kind of content would you like to see more of on this channel? Do you prefer thrilling, provocative tales of deceit or emotional family dramas laced with tension? If you're drawn to stimulating tales of betrayal, comment number 1. If you lean toward dramatic family sagas, comment number 2. Your feedback helps us create unforgettable stories that leave a lasting impression, raw, emotional, and irresistibly gripping. The digital clock on my nightstand reads 2:17 a.m. The house is quiet except for the soft rhythm of the ceiling fan above my bed and the occasional creaking of the old oak tree outside my window. Everyone is asleep, and in the stillness I can finally face what I've been avoiding for years. The truth I've kept buried beneath layers of justification and denial. Some nights the weight of it seems unbearable, like tonight when sleep eludes me and memories surface with painful clarity. I never thought I'd be this woman. The one who breaks vows. The one who lies. The one who hurts the person she promised to love forever. In college I judged those stories harshly. The affairs, the secret lives, the betrayals. How easily we condemn what we don't yet understand. But here I am. My name is Claire. I'm 39 years old, a marketing director at a mid-size firm, mother of 2 beautiful children, and for 15 years I was Mark's wife. From the outside we had everything. The renovated colonial in a good school district, summer vacations at the lake house, Christmas cards featuring perfect smiles, the envy of our friends, the ideal family. According to my mother, I played my role well. Devoted wife, attentive mother, successful professional who somehow managed to balance it all. I was the woman other mothers approach for advice at school functions. The wife men told their wives to emulate. What those Christmas cards didn't show was the silence that had grown between us. A silence that started as small pauses in conversation and eventually expanded into a void so vast I couldn't remember the last time Mark and I truly saw each other. It happened so gradually that I barely noticed until the disconnect was complete. Like watching a boat drift away from shore inch by imperceptible inch until suddenly it's a distant speck on the horizon. He's a good man. I need to say that first. He worked hard, loved our children fiercely, never raised his voice. He remembered birthdays and anniversaries. He fixed things around the house without being asked. He coached our son's little league team despite his travel schedule, rearranging business trips to make the important games. On paper I had no reason to complain. And for a long time I didn't, not even to myself. But somewhere along the way we stopped touching. Not just physically, though that too had faded to perfunctory kisses and the occasional weekend intimacy that felt more like checking a box than connecting. We stopped touching each other's minds, hearts, dreams. I'd speak and he'd nod, eyes on his phone. He'd talk about work and I'd make the appropriate sounds of interest while mentally reviewing my to-do list for the next day. When had we become so skilled at this performance of connection while experiencing none of it? I remember one night lying beside him in bed, both of us reading, he on his tablet, me with a novel I couldn't focus on. I glanced over at his profile, this face I'd known for almost 2 decades, and felt a surge of something like panic. I don't know you anymore, I thought. And you don't know me. The realization brought tears to my eyes, but Mark never noticed. I turned away, swallowed the knot in my throat, and continued pretending to read until his tablet light went off and he rolled over to sleep. I told myself this was normal, that passion naturally evolves into companionship, that the dull ache of loneliness I felt even when we were in the same room was just a phase, or worse, a character flaw in me wanting too much, being ungrateful for what I had. After all, wasn't this what growing up was about? Accepting reality over fantasy I buried, the longing for connection so deeply that I almost convinced myself it didn't exist. Then David joined our company. He wasn't particularly handsome in the conventional sense, a bit shorter than Mark with salt and pepper hair and glasses that slipped down his nose when he concentrated. But he listened when I spoke, really listened with his whole being. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered details from conversations we'd had weeks before. The first time he referenced something I'd mentioned in passing during a previous meeting, a concern about my mother's health that I briefly alluded to. I was so startled by being truly heard that I nearly forgot to respond. It started innocently enough. Coffee after a late meeting. Lunch discussions about a challenging project. Text messages about work that gradually, almost imperceptibly shifted to personal topics. His divorce 3 years prior. My concerns about my daughter's struggle with anxiety. Book recommendations. Memories of college days. Inside jokes that made meetings more bearable. The slight smile we'd exchange across the conference table when our CEO used his favorite corporate jargon. I told myself we were just friends. colleagues with a good rapport. I told myself this even as I started paying more attention to my appearance on days I knew I'd see him. Even as I found myself checking my phone constantly when he hadn't texted back. Even as my heart quickened when he entered a room. Even as I began to count the hours until our next interaction and replay our conversations when I should have been present with my family. There was an evening about 2 months after we began working together when I realized the danger. I was making dinner, chopping vegetables while Emma did homework at the island and Mark was upstairs helping our son with a science project. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Nothing inappropriate, just a funny observation about a meeting we both attended. I laughed out loud and Emma looked up. "Who's that?" she asked. "Just a colleague," I replied too quickly. I felt my cheeks warm as I set the phone down, screen facing the counter. That night, I promised myself to establish better boundaries, to keep things professional, to remember my priorities, a promise I would break within days. When a particularly difficult presentation and David's unwavering support led to celebratory drinks that lasted much longer than they should have. The first time we crossed the line, it wasn't with a kiss or a touch. It was with words. Sitting in his car after a team dinner when he'd offered to drive me home because Mark was out of town with the kids at a soccer tournament. The rain drummed steadily on the roof, creating a cocoon of intimacy as we sat in my driveway, still talking an hour after we'd arrived. "I think about you," he said quietly, eyes fixed on the steering wheel. "More than I should." His voice was low, almost apologetic, and in the dim light from the dashboard, I could see the tension in his jaw, the way he gripped the wheel a little tighter. 5 simple words that acknowledged what we'd both been dancing around for weeks. I should have shut it down then. Should have thanked him for the ride, gone inside, and never mentioned it again. Should have remembered my children sleeping inside. The trust of my husband coaching their team 2 states away. Instead, I whispered back, "I think about you too." 5 simple words that changed everything. We didn't act on it right away. For weeks, we circled each other, maintaining the pretense of friendship while the undercurrent between us grew stronger. The tension when our hands accidentally touched passing documents. The lingering eye contact in meetings. The increasingly personal texts late at night when I should have been sleeping beside my husband. The elaborate excuses to work together on projects that didn't require both of us. The guilt started then before anything physical had even happened. I'd look at Mark across the breakfast table and feel a heaviness in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I'd watch him help our son with homework and be overwhelmed with shame. I'd hear him tell me he loved me before falling asleep and have to fight back tears. Some nights I'd lie awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing, despising myself for the thoughts in my head. But I didn't stop. Looking back, I wonder if I was addicted to the feeling not just of being desired, but of being seen, of mattering to someone who had no obligation to care. With David, I wasn't someone's wife or mother or daughter or employee. I was just Claire, a woman with thoughts and dreams and fears that were heard, acknowledged, validated. The first kiss happened after a company holiday party. David offered to walk me to my car. The parking garage was deserted, dimly lit, our footsteps echoing against concrete. We stopped beside my car and I knew what was about to happen. I knew I should say goodnight, get in my car, drive home to my family. Instead I stood there, heart pounding as he stepped closer. The air between us seemed charged, heavy with possibility and danger. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his breath warm against my cheek. I didn't. The kiss was gentle, questioning, brief, but it shattered something fundamental inside me. The barrier between who I thought I was and who I was becoming crumbled in that moment. I had crossed a line I never thought I would. And the terrifying part was how easy it felt. How right despite everything I knew about it being wrong. I drove home in a daze that night. Walked into my house, greeted Mark with a kiss on the cheek, and asked about his evening as if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't just fundamentally altered the fabric of our marriage. He told me about a plumbing issue he'd fixed, about a funny thing our son had said at dinner, and I nodded and smiled, the taste of another man still faintly on my lips. The disconnect between my outward normality and the chaos inside me was dizzying. What followed was 6 months of living a double life, compartmentalizing in a way I never thought possible. Being a mother and wife in one sphere while nurturing the secret connection in another, finding excuses to work late, inventing networking events, volunteering for business trips I would have previously avoided, once telling Mark I was visiting my college roommate for the weekend when I was really in a hotel room 30 m away with David. The deception came easier than I'd like to admit. Each lie was a small betrayal that paved the way for the next one. Each secret meeting was both exhilarating and devastating. With David, I felt seen, desired, alive in a way I hadn't in years. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. Books, politics, childhood memories, hopes and fears. He knew parts of me that Mark had never bothered to discover or that I had never bothered to share. But the moments after, driving home alone, washing away his scent before facing my family, those were filled with the self-loathing so intense I sometimes had to pull over because I couldn't see through my tears. The mental gymnastics required to justify my actions exhausted me. I wasn't sleeping. I was losing weight. There were moments when I caught sight of myself in a mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back, the shadows under her eyes, the tightness around her mouth, the constant low-grade anxiety radiating from her every movement. Mark suspected nothing, which somehow made it worse. His trust in me was so complete that the possibility of my betrayal never crossed his mind. How many nights did I sit across from him at dinner, smiling and nodding at his stories while my phone burned in my pocket with messages from David? How many mornings did I kiss him goodbye, knowing where I had been the afternoon before? "You seem distracted lately," he said once, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Work stress, or is it your mom's health thing?" The genuine concern in his eyes nearly broke me. He had remembered my mother's minor surgery, had asked about it without prompting. A small act of attentiveness that I had convinced myself he was incapable of. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I had married, caring, perceptive when it mattered. What if I had been wrong? What if the disconnect between us wasn't entirely his fault? I told myself I deserved happiness, that I'd given 15 years to a marriage that had become empty, that I wasn't hurting anyone if no one knew, that maybe this was just how life worked. You took your joy where you could find it, made compromises, accepted imperfection. Some days I almost believed it. The wake-up call came from an unexpected source. My daughter Emma, 13 years old, perceptive in that unfiltered way teenagers can be. We were alone in the kitchen one evening, Mark at a work event, my son at a friend's house. I was checking my phone, smiling at a message from David, when Emma said quietly, "You seem different lately, Mom." Something in her tone made me look up. She was watching me with a mixture of confusion and concern that made my stomach clench. There was something else in her expression too. A wariness that hadn't been there before, as if she was reassessing who I was. "Different house, sweetie?" I asked, setting my phone down too quickly. She shrugged, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "I don't know. You smile at your phone a lot. And sometimes you seem far away, even when you're right here." She paused, then asked the question that would haunt me. "Are you and Dad okay?" In that moment, looking at my daughter, this beautiful, perceptive child who was watching and learning from every choice I made, the full weight of what I was doing crashed down on me. I wasn't just betraying Mark. I was betraying Emma and her brother. I was showing them that vows could be broken, that deception was acceptable, that immediate gratification mattered more than integrity. I was teaching them about love and commitment in the most damaging way possible. "We're fine," I lied. One more to add to the growing pile. But something shifted inside me that night. I lay awake until dawn, replaying that conversation, seeing the worry in Emma's eyes. What kind of model was I for her? What would she think of me if she knew the truth? Would she ever trust me or anyone again? I thought about my own mother, who had stayed in an unhappy marriage for the children, her resentment seeping into every interaction until we all drowned in it. I had promised myself I wouldn't repeat her mistakes. Yet here I was, creating an entirely different kind of damage. The end came not with a dramatic confrontation or discovery, but with a quiet phone call to David. The next day I stepped out of the office, walked to a small park nearby, and sat on a bench beneath a maple tree just beginning to turn gold with autumn. "I can't do this anymore," I told him, voice breaking despite my resolve to stay composed. It was a long silence on the other end. I could hear his breathing, the faint sounds of his office in the background. "I know," he finally said, his voice gentle. "I think I've been waiting for this call." He didn't fight it. Maybe he'd sensed the change. Or maybe he'd been waiting for this moment, carrying his own burden of guilt. We agreed to maintain professional distance at work, to delete the text threats, to never speak of what had happened. There were no dramatic declarations of love, no promises to run away together, just two adults acknowledging a mistake and agreeing to end it before more damage was done. "You deserve to be happy, Claire," he said before we hung up. "Whether that's with Mark or someone else, or on your own. Just be happy." The simplicity of his goodbye made me realize that whatever we'd wasn't the grand passion I'd sometimes pretended it was. It was two lonely people finding temporary comfort in each other. Important, yes. Life-changing, certainly, but not the kind of love worth destroying families for. That night, I sat Mark down after the kids were in bed. I didn't confess, a choice I still question. Was it selfless protection or cowardly self-preservation? I'll never be certain. But I did tell him I was unhappy, that I felt disconnected, that I wanted us to try again, really try to find each other, that somewhere along the way we'd stopped being partners and started being roommates, and I couldn't live that way anymore. His face when I said those words. I'll never forget it. Surprise, then hurt, then a quiet determination that reminded me of the man I'd fallen in love with years ago. Whatever it takes, he said, reaching for my hand across the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals, but so few real conversations. I don't want to lose you, Claire. The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. He had almost lost me. Might still if he ever discovered the truth, but in that moment, his sincerity gave me hope that perhaps we could rebuild something worth saving. We started counseling. The following week, began having regular date nights, committed to putting our phones away after dinner, started a ritual of morning coffee together before the kids woke up, just 15 minutes of checking in before the day began. It wasn't easy. There were awkward silences, painful conversations, moments when the distance between us seemed insurmountable. The guilt I carried made me defensive sometimes, overly accommodating others. There were nights I cried alone in the bathroom, not because I missed David, but because I couldn't undo what I'd done. Our therapist asked us once to describe what had first attracted us to each other. Mark talked about my laugh, my confidence, the way I could talk to anyone. I have forgotten he ever noticed those things. I talked about his steadiness, his integrity, his quiet kindness, qualities I had taken for granted and then convinced myself had disappeared when perhaps they had just been buried under years of mutual neglect. It's been 2 years since I ended the affair. Mark still doesn't know, and that secret sits between us like a third presence sometimes. The counselor suggested full disclosure would just transfer my guilt to his pain. And since it was over, I should focus on rebuilding rather than confessing. I'm not sure if that was the right advice. Some days I think the truth would have been cleaner, fairer, even if it ended us. Other days I'm grateful for the chance to rebuild without that particular obstacle. There are moments when the urge to confess is overwhelming, like when he tells me how much he trusts me, or when he thanks me for giving our marriage another chance. The words rise in my throat, desperate to be spoken, but I swallow them back. Perhaps that's my penance, to carry this alone, to live with the knowledge of what I almost threw away. David transferred to another office 6 months after we ended things. I saw him once at a corporate event last year. We exchanged polite nods across the room, nothing more. The pole was still there, faint but recognizable, like the memory of an old injury that aches when it rains. I chose to stay on the other side of the room. When a colleague suggested we all go out for drinks after, I declined and went home to my family instead. Small choices, but they matter. My marriage is better now, though different than before. There's an awareness between Mark and me, a deliberate quality to our connection that wasn't there in the easy early days or the disconnected middle years. We work at daily choices to turn toward each other rather than a way to ask the difficult questions, to stay present even when it's uncomfortable. Last month, we took a weekend trip, just the two of us sitting on the balcony of our hotel room watching the sunset over the ocean. Mark took my hand and said, "I'm glad we found our way back to each other." I leaned my head against his shoulder, throat tight with emotion, gratitude, shame, love, all tangled together in a knot I may never fully unravel. Sometimes I think he knows or suspects something happened. There's an occasional look in his eyes, a hesitation before trust. Or maybe I'm projecting my own knowledge onto him. Perhaps the hesitation is simply the wisdom that comes from merely losing something precious. The understanding that nothing is guaranteed, that even the strongest bonds can fray if not tended. Emma is 15 now, navigating her own complicated world of relationships and identity. Sometimes when I watch her, I'm struck by how much she resembles me at that age. The same determined set to her jaw, the same sensitivity beneath the confident exterior. I wonder what lessons she's absorbing from our family now. I hope she sees the effort, the commitment, the daily choice to love. I hope she learns that mistakes don't have to define us, that redemption is possible, that relationships require work, but are worth the struggle. If you're wondering whether I regret it, the answer isn't simple. I regret the pain I caused, the lies I told, the example I set. I regret risking everything that matters for something that in retrospect was more about my own emptiness than any real connection with David. I regret not having the courage to address the problems in my marriage directly before they created such fertile ground for betrayal. But I can't honestly say I regret the wake-up call. Without it, Mark and I might have continued drifting apart until we were nothing but polite roommates raising children together. Sometimes it takes standing at the edge of losing everything to recognize its value. Sometimes we need to see ourselves clearly capable of deception, of selfishness, of terrible mistakes before we can begin the work of becoming better. What I've learned is that marriage isn't just about love, it's about choice. Daily, hourly choices to nurture connection, to stay present, to do the hard work of intimacy. Both people have to make those choices, but I can only control my own. I've learned to speak up when I'm feeling disconnected, to ask for what I need instead of expecting Mark to read my mind, to create space for meaningful conversation amid busy lives. I've also learned that we're all capable of things we never thought possible, both beautiful and terrible. That the line between right and wrong isn't always as clear as we'd like it to be. That forgiveness, especially of oneself, is a process, not an event. That healing happens in small moments of grace. A genuine laugh shared over dinner, the casual touch of a hand while passing in the hallway, the vulnerability of admitting a fear or sharing a dream. The digital clock now reads 3:21 a.m. Soon, the house will begin to stir. Mark will roll over, reach for me in that half-asleep way he does. The kids will start getting ready for school. Life will continue in its mundane, precious rhythm. In a few hours I'll make breakfast, help Emma find her missing history textbook, remind my son about his dentist appointment after school. I'll kiss Mark goodbye as he leaves for work, and the weight of my secret will be there, as it always is. But it grows lighter with time, with each moment of genuine connection that proves we are building something real and lasting from the ashes of what I nearly destroyed. I don't know if I deserve this second chance. I don't know if the foundation we've rebuilt is strong enough to last, but I do know that I'm fully present now, eyes wide open, no longer taking for granted the life we've created. And maybe, just maybe, that's